What if the very bloodline that claimed divine right to rule carried within it the seeds of what they considered their greatest shame? For centuries, royal families across Europe built their power on a simple premise. They were chosen by God, their bloodlines pure and superior. Kings and queens ruled through the carefully crafted myth that their very DNA was blessed, that their offspring would naturally inherit the qualities needed to lead nations. But nature had other plans. Hidden in the grand palaces of Europe's most powerful dynasties, children were born who challenged everything these royal families claimed to represent. Children with almond-shaped eyes, gentle dispositions, and intellectual differences that would today be recognized as Down syndrome. In an age when divine perfection was required for legitimacy, these children represented an impossible contradiction. What followed was not compassion, but centuries of systematic cruelty disguised as protection. Royal families faced an agonizing choice: acknowledge these children and risk their claim to divine authority, or find ways to make them disappear from history altogether. Time and again they chose erasure over acceptance, image over love. This is the forgotten story of how royal families treated their most vulnerable children. In medieval Europe, disability was not seen as a medical condition, but as divine punishment. Across every kingdom, the same terrifying belief held power. Children born different were evidence of God's displeasure or the devil's handiwork. For royal families, this created a theological crisis that threatened their rule. Kings and queens insisted their power flowed directly from heaven, their bloodlines sacred, their children destined for greatness. When a child was born with Down syndrome, it wasn't just a family challenge. It was a catastrophic crack in the divine narrative that justified their existence. Medieval physicians offered explanations that deepened the horror. Some claimed these children were changelings, fairy children swapped in the night. Others whispered of curses or divine punishment for secret sins. The most terrifying theory suggested God had withdrawn his blessing from the bloodline itself. The solutions were as brutal as the beliefs that drove them. Infants who showed signs of difference were quietly removed from royal nurseries within days of birth. Some were abandoned at monastery gates with no identification. Others disappeared entirely, their existence scrubbed from family records as if they had never lived. The fear wasn't just theological, it was practical. Medieval subjects looked to their rulers for signs of divine favor during plague, famine, or war. A royal child with visible differences could spark rumors of cursed bloodlines, encouraging rival claimants or popular uprisings. The birth of such a child could destabilize an entire kingdom. As Europe emerged into the Age of Enlightenment, royal families discovered a more civilized way to dispose of their inconvenient children. The 18th and 19th centuries brought the institutional system. Across the continent, grand buildings rose with names like Royal Hospital for the Care of the Unfortunate. These weren't medical facilities. They were elegant prisons, designed to house society's unwanted while maintaining the fiction of compassionate care. For royal families, these institutions became the perfect solution. They could demonstrate Christian charity while ensuring these children would never threaten the family's public image. The process was businesslike in its efficiency. A royal child born with Down syndrome would be moved from the palace nursery to a private room in one of these facilities. Their name would be changed, their royal identity stripped away, their existence transformed from embarrassing reality to expensive secret. The House of Hanover perfected this system. When Princess Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz gave birth to her 15th child in 1778, the infant showed signs of intellectual disability. Rather than risk scandal, royal physicians arranged for the child to be placed in Bethlehem Hospital under an assumed name. Official birth records listed the child as stillborn, while palace payments to the hospital continued for decades. These arrangements required elaborate networks of complicity. Hospital administrators signed confidentiality agreements in exchange for royal patronage. Staff were sworn to secrecy. False identities were constructed with fabricated family histories. Some institutions specialized in housing royal embarrassments, developing expertise in managing multiple false identities while maintaining absolute discretion. By the 20th century, the world had witnessed two devastating wars: the rise of modern medicine and growing awareness of human rights. Surely, one might think, the barbaric practices of earlier eras would have ended. Surely royal families would have learned to embrace their disabled children with dignity and love. The story of Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon proves how tragically wrong such assumptions would be. Born in 1919 and 1926 respectively, these sisters were first cousins to the future Queen Elizabeth II. Their mother, Fenella Bowes-Lyon, was sister to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. This wasn't some distant branch of the royal family tree. These were children with direct bloodline connections to the British throne. Yet from their earliest years, it became clear that Nerissa and Catherine had severe intellectual disabilities, likely including Down syndrome or closely related conditions. Rather than providing them with loving care within the royal household, the family made a decision that would haunt British royalty for decades. In 1941, 15-year-old Catherine and 22-year-old Nerissa were quietly transferred to the Royal Earlswood Hospital in Surrey, a long-term institution for people with mental disabilities. But the family didn't stop there. In an act of breathtaking cruelty, they deliberately falsified official records to list both sisters as deceased, even though they were very much alive and confined in the hospital. This wasn't a medieval cover-up or an 18th-century institutional arrangement. This was happening in modern Britain during World War II, while the royal family was publicly championing British values and moral leadership. The sisters were effectively erased from existence, while their cousin prepared to become queen of the most powerful empire on earth. For decades, Nerissa and Catherine lived as unknown patients in Earlswood Hospital. They received minimal visits from family members, if any at all. While their royal relatives attended state banquets, coronations, and jubilee celebrations, the sisters remained locked away in an overcrowded institution, their true identities known only to a handful of staff members bound by strict confidentiality agreements. The Bowes-Lyon sisters' fate wasn't inevitable. Across Europe during the same era, other royal families faced identical situations and made markedly different choices, revealing a spectrum of shame that ranged from total erasure to protective isolation. Princess Alexandrine of Prussia, born in 1915, represented one alternative path. The daughter of Crown Prince Wilhelm, she was diagnosed with Down syndrome during an era when the condition was poorly understood but increasingly recognized. Unlike the Bowes-Lyon sisters, Alexandrine's parents chose not to institutionalize her. She remained within the family home, received private education, and occasionally appeared in family photographs that survive to this day. Yet even this seemingly compassionate approach carried its own forms of exclusion. Alexandrine was systematically kept away from public ceremonies, state functions, and official royal duties. While her brothers were groomed for leadership roles and public service, she lived in what could be described as gentle house arrest. The message was clear. She could be loved privately, but never acknowledged publicly as a full member of the royal family. An even more poignant example emerged from France with Anne de Gaulle, daughter of the future president Charles de Gaulle. Born in 1928 with Down syndrome, Anne benefited from parents who genuinely cherished her presence in their lives. Charles de Gaulle was known to have an especially tender relationship with his daughter, often spending quiet evenings reading to her and including her in family activities that other prominent families would have considered scandalous. Yet even in this loving household, the social pressures of the era demanded concealment. Anne rarely appeared at public events. Her condition was never discussed in interviews or political profiles, and when she tragically died of pneumonia at age 20 in 1948, her father's grief was largely private. These individual stories represent far more than isolated family tragedies. They are documented evidence of a systematic pattern that stretched across centuries and continents, a coordinated effort by European royalty to eliminate any trace of imperfection from their carefully constructed public images. What emerges from the historical record is not a collection of unfortunate choices, but a deliberate network of institutional complicity designed to erase disabled children from royal lineages entirely. Across the Habsburg courts of Austria and Hungary, the Bourbon palaces of France and Spain, the Romanov estates of Russia, and the countless German principalities, the same practices emerged with disturbing consistency. Royal families didn't independently arrive at similar solutions. They actively shared strategies, recommended institutions to each other, and created informal networks of discretion that spanned national boundaries. The scope of this erasure becomes clear when examining the financial records that survive in various European archives. The House of Savoy maintained standing payments to 4 different institutions across Italy and Switzerland. The Swedish royal family channeled funds through charitable foundations to facilities that specialized in housing aristocratic embarrassments. Even smaller royal houses, like those in Bavaria and Saxony, coordinated their efforts to ensure that disabled children could be moved between institutions if necessary to maintain absolute secrecy. This wasn't merely about hiding individual children, it was about systematically rewriting history itself. Court genealogists worked hand in hand with institutional administrators to ensure that birth records, family trees, and official histories contained no trace of these inconvenient lives. Children were not just physically removed from royal households, they were retroactively eliminated from royal bloodlines, their existence scrubbed from documents that would be consulted by future historians and biographers. Today, when we see people with Down syndrome graduating from universities and living independent lives, it can be difficult to comprehend how recently these possibilities would have been unthinkable. The transformation has been rapid, but we risk forgetting how close we are to the era when royal families considered such children too shameful to acknowledge. The last Boleyn sister died in 2014. By bringing these forgotten children out of the shadows, we accomplish something their families refuse to do. We grant them the dignity of recognition, the honor of being remembered, the acknowledgement that their lives mattered. Nerissa and Catherine Boleyn, Princess Alexandrine of Prussia, Anne de Gaulle, and countless unnamed children whose stories were deliberately destroyed, they deserved better. Their stories carry a powerful warning about the seductive nature of shame and institutional discrimination. No family, regardless of power, is immune to the fear of judgment that can transform love into abandonment. Yet in remembering these children, we celebrate how far human understanding has traveled. Most importantly, these stories challenge us to remain vigilant. The choice between image and humanity, between reputation and recognition, these choices continue every day. By remembering the children who were once considered too shameful to acknowledge, we commit ourselves to ensuring that no child will ever again be treated as a secret that must be hidden away